Welcome to EyeOpener, powered by Siemens. And now, your host, Gugan Sanger.
Yeah. And Ryan, just touching onto the first point you made, so you made reference to people.
Yeah.
And I feel that, this is something which is underestimated, because when it comes to a PdM project, it's so important to build these relationships. And I guess the question that we seem to get asked quite a lot is around who are those key stakeholders when it comes to a predictive maintenance project?
Yeah.
And what does that look like to yourself?
So when we begin a project, in terms of these key stakeholders, we identify 5 key characters who will be essential in the deployment of the project, but then also taking ownership of it and being able to scale it themselves. Because our goal would always be for customers to take ownership of that journey. We want them to be autonomous, independent. So the first of which is going to be the project sponsor. They're going to be the one that's going to champion it, ensure that all the resources are being delivered to the customer, for the customer, I would say, ensuring that it is moving smoothly on their side. And if there are any barriers kind of politically internally, they'll be able to address that. And then you'll have a maintenance lead. So kind of as it says, they'll be responsible for like the delegation of the tasks. They'll be very much engaged with the platform and the cases that would be raised. So, organizing that on the assets that are being monitored. You would then have like a PdM champion. This will be very much the strong day-to-day user of the application, and looking that they kind of work alongside that maintenance lead in terms of the information that's being raised for the predictive analytics. A controls engineer would be the 4th one. So they're really going to be like the machine specialist. They're going to have a lot of knowledge, expertise, which can be valuable for the AI machine learning to learn from. So their input's going to be vitally important with regards to any contextual operational data information that would be necessary to really understand about the machine and its process. And then finally, we need someone from IT, like an IT engineer, and they're super important because they need to be able to push data to the cloud. So having them on board, and they need to understand that they're a super important part of that project in enabling data to go from where it is on the customer side to be able to push to the AI platform to do that predictive analytics. And that seems like a lot of people, but each member of that team will have different roles and responsibilities and time commitments throughout the project. So when you look at the kind of design phase, the IT person might not have a lot of input. Whereas when you go to the deploying, you're really looking to onboard assets, machines and data into the application. The IT person is going to be heavily required. So from a time commitment, it'd be about 3-4 hours a week for, say, a month, 6-week period. It could be. But then for the rest of the project, they might need to do, less than an hour a week. So one of the things that we look to really explicitly tell them is what their time commitments would be and when are they going to be most needed throughout the project in kind of like different phases.
Yeah. And I guess that's what makes a successful PdM project. You've got all of these key stakeholders who are involved, and they can bring they can bring something to the table. So they've got their own skills and expertise, and I think that's what kind of makes it fit and piece together.
Exactly, and they're able to collaborate together. That they're able to understand what their strengths are. How can they leverage other people's skills? For example, if there is an integration piece needed, then they know they can lean on their IT engineer a bit more. If they need some specific knowledge about that machine, they know they can lean on this person. And it's within a good project team, and from the people side of it, they can lean on each other when necessary, and also have that trust in each other to be able to do their roles and execute them efficiently.
Yeah. And I guess this alludes me to my next question, just around, you spoke about business case.
Yeah.
And when it comes to a business case, it will be really interesting for you to define what actually needs to be included into that, or what is included? So how is that business case, I guess, created? What's the main focus points around it?
Sure. So I guess with regards to the business case, first of all, a customer would look to do some kind of asset criticality assessment, where they're looking at, okay, what's going to be the highest priority assets to really onboard. They can do this through kind of, criticality to production, in terms of like maybe parts costs, maybe current unplanned downtime experienced, or if there's a certain group of assets that their like equipment efficiency is just very low. Organizations will do it in different ways, but when we come to actually building that business case, we want to understand what is the cost of, say, unplanned downtime per line, per an asset group, and in terms of like the maintenance cost as well. What is the cost of actually the labor, the spare parts, and kind of hours that they're spending doing this planned maintenance. Going back to downtime as well, not only the cost but also the amount of hours that they have for unplanned downtime on certain assets. And when you're able to look at, say, those costs per hour or per asset group, that really helps to identify in those initial stages where is that value, where is that benefit, to initially beginning this project and really getting it up and running. So those would be the two main things that we can look to calculate. Like, yes, minor stops as well. Like, we can look to have a look at, for example, what assets or what lines may have like large minor stops. But I think through unplanned downtime, through the maintenance costs, and when you're looking at spare parts, etc., that will be what we will look to identify the value and benefit for an organisation, and to help guide them. And also, if the customer is able to do this prior to that, and if they have a lot of knowledge, it helps to speed up this process significantly. So really being able to identify that allows them to then go internally and say, okay, we've identified, say, asset X and asset Y. We know, for example, the amount of unplanned downtime is this much, and the maintenance costs are this much. We feel that if we begin with these assets for this initial deployment, we can see some real immediate value, and it can deliver some savings to us as an organisation to help us meet our quotas or achieve our targets and goals.
Yeah, and I think it helps to define the goals realistically. I think that's what it is.
Exactly. So we have a set of criteria that we've used during projects, and that we don't see them as binary. Like, we always stress it's not binary, but it's what we want to measure it at when it comes to that 12-month period. And it's also important for them. Like, while we know what we can use as success criteria, we want them to be able to give their input. So in projects there's been a collaboration of a bit of both, right? So where some people will need, like some companies will need guidance, we can push what we feel would be good success criteria, but we want that to be driven by them, and we want them to be happy with it. Because when you're getting 3-4 months into a project, you don't want people to be saying to themselves, why are we doing this? Everyone knows why we're doing this. Everyone knows what the benefits are of this, and everyone is aligned and moving in one direction to ensure that it can be successful.
Yeah.
And that's where that kind of pre-defining phase is so important.
Yeah, and I completely understand why it is very important.
Yeah.
I mean, the question that I was going to ask you is, people make this assumption around ROI, and they want it so quick. They've got these assets and they want their downtime to be reduced significantly, and people make this assumption that this downtime is going to be reduced in the initial, couple months.
Yeah.
And I guess from your perspective, when you touched in, just going back to your point around duration, and I guess, when it comes to each PdM project, it's case by case. So it's not going to be kind of one size fits all. It will be different across industries and, asset types, etc. And so from your experience, when it comes to ROI, how do you... or how have you seen that kind of play out, if that makes sense? So we have this initial period of time where you've got the business case, you're having these conversations, these are expectations, customers got expectations, we're working on how to reduce the downtime, step-by-step transition, right? But when it comes to ROI, what has that been in, from your perspective? How does that look like?
ROI is always a funny one, I think, because it's so important. It's how companies will measure, whether they're going to, continue, scale project, and ROI is kind of everything for organizations. I think it's one where we have to manage that expectation very carefully. I think when we're speaking about, savings from unplanned downtime, from maintenance costs, we've had our experience with previous projects, and we know what some of the industry kind of standards are. But we always say this is potential. And it always is potential before you begin a project. ROI and potential savings from maintenance, reducing downtime, it's all potential. And I think that the good projects will really understand that it is just potential, because we can only do so much, and it comes back to that collaboration. If they don't buy in, that potential will not be realised. So it's a really interesting one. Like we can say, yes, if we're able to say conservatively reduce your unplanned downtime by 20%, that's still just potential. When it comes to defining what's binary and what's not binary, it's always non-binary, because a lot of it's going to be on the customer, on how they actioning that information. Are they reacting it, or are they acknowledging it quick enough? So while we can say yes, we can reduce your unplanned downtime by 20%, it's still going to be on the user to ensure that they're using that information correctly. And when it comes to, let's say, planned maintenance, we can say yes, that machine is behaving healthy, but if you still go and do your maintenance, then we can't impact it. So ROI is always yes, it's important, but I think it's, like you said, case by case basis, and trying to make sure you define it properly with them, and the customer and the good customers will understand that it is potential. There's still a lot of work they need to do to be able to achieve it. But of course, from our side, we're always going to be accountable to delivering an ROI, whether it's going to be 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. In case of understanding that value and benefit, it's always going to be, if there's a high problematic asset, the ROI potential is always going to be greater on it than one that's not really failing, the maintenance is low. So this is where that calculating what are the highest priority assets. If you're able to do that, then the ROI potential is going to be a lot greater, and it's going to be a lot easier to achieve, with what you invest in the project. So again, it kind of goes full loop right back to building that business case. Will help to, define what ROI can potentially be achieved, and I should emphasize the potential.
Also, it's a funny one, because when as soon as you hear the word ROI, return on investment, it's, the one way that I like to define it, it's a work in progress. And I guess when it comes to predictive maintenance, it is step by step. It's a transition. There's a lot of value that you can get from, yes, you can calculate return on investment through unplanned downtime, through maintenance costs, but I guess when you look at, if you go and buy anything, and you always say to yourself, what am I going to get from this? Yes, you might get something tangible, but I think the non-tangibles is better understanding your machines, being able to understand what failures are occurring, how to do better, more precise maintenance. But then I think in terms of ROI, what price can you put on your reputation, your credit, kind of credibility, and being trustworthy to be able to deliver your product on time, and to ensure that you can meet those quotas? What number can you put on that? I think there's a lot of intangibles that we help to impact just outside of downtime, outside of maintenance costs, that I think when it comes to delivering projects, in those first few months, people get it. People will see, yes, it's enabling us to really, be able to have all, a massive eye over our fleet of assets, and be able to see what's going wrong.
To find out more, search Senseye Predictive Maintenance.